Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Laura Winnie. I am the Education Coordinator for DuPage County Animal Services. Thank you so much for joining me tonight for Canine Concerns, Common Behavior Issues, and what we can do about them. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody should be currently muted. That's to help with preventing any audio interference. We are recording this webinar to post to our YouTube page later on, so please keep yourselves muted and your video off. If too many of us have video going, it can create some lagging issues with Zoom. So if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box at any time. I'll look at them at the end of the session. So our program tonight should run about an hour, and then I'll have time at the end for questions if anybody has something specific that they'd like to talk about. And you can throw those questions in at any time. I just won't look at them until the end. Now, I am going to throw into the chat box right now a link to our program survey. I'm always looking for feedback on our programs, what we're doing great, what we can improve on. Suggestions for future programs would be fabulous. So if at the end of the program you have some time, really appreciate you filling out that form. Now tonight we are going to talk about dogs, and I like to start out with talking about the history of dogs and humans. Then we're going to transition over into SHED for dogs. So SHED stands for shelter, healthcare, exercise, and diet. It's basically the 4 essentials that you need for a happy and healthy pet. Because a lot of times when we get these calls about behavior issues, sometimes that means something's missing in those quintessential 4. So we're going to spend some time on that. Then we'll do a deep dive into the behavior problems and what we can do about it. So that will be at the end. I'm going to cover a wide variety of situations and challenges that we commonly hear about at DuPage County Animal Services, and also those that I personally have seen as a dog owner. If there's something in particular that you're here for, yay, stay with me. And if I do not address that particular concern, again, feel free to throw it into the chat box and I will give you as much feedback as I can tonight. I am not an expert on dog behavior, but I do work with experts on dog behavior. So if there's something that I don't know how to address or give you pointers on, I'm always happy to go back to my coworkers, get something, and then send it on to you later on. Without further ado, let's go in and talk a little bit about where some of this behavior that we see comes from. I want to focus a little bit on that dog-human relationship because it has changed over time and it can be a little surprising where some of these behaviors come from. So there are lots of theories on how and when domestication came about. Okay, a lot of the times we give ourselves a little bit too much credit on domestication of dogs. You know, the theory that someone way back in the day, thousands of years ago, befriended an injured wolf, and then that's how that domestication happened. Or maybe they found wolf puppies and brought them into their home and discovered that. So there's been a lot of back and forth among scientists also about when this happened. Until very recently, we thought it was around 12,000 years ago, but there's been some DNA analysis that suggests a date over 100,000 years ago. So that is still very much in debate as well on when the transformation of wolves and when they became dogs, and specifically when they became person's best friend. Okay. What we cannot negate is the role of genetics and personality with domestication. All right. There was never going to be this overall love bond between all humans and all wolves. Okay. There is a reason that there are still wolves. And what the current theory is that the friendly, most sociable wolf in the pack is the one that basically domesticated us. It discovered all the good things about being around humans. And when you look at the benefits to people, the immediate benefits, yeah, okay, you get a guard dog, right? You get someone that's growling and barking if there's noise, and you have that companionship. But all that other stuff that we associate with why we have dogs, you know, hunting companions and working dogs, all these things that we've worked on them for, those wouldn't be immediate benefits, right? That's something you have to work on even today. But on the dog end of it, on the wolf end, they get food, steady supply of food, shelter from the elements, they get that companionship, and they get protection from bigger, badder animals. Okay. So the current theory is that it's not so much that humans realized how fabulous it would be to have hunting animals working for them and domesticated them. It's more dogs, wolves realized, ooh, these people drop food. And if I'm nearby, I can get it. That seems like a great deal. Okay, I'm going to see what I can do to make that. And then, of course, if we have the friendliest wolf that's coming into our circle, and then that wolf has puppies, then they're going to take on the genetics and the traits of that very friendly wolf. And so it's going to continue down. So understanding that this was not just some random magical occurrence. It wasn't a Disney movie, okay, where, you know, we see this injured puppy out in the woods and we're like, woo, new best friend. It was a process, and it was a process probably initiated by dogs for the benefits of being around humans. And it was only kind of after the fact that humans realized, oh, well, we can get a lot of benefits from them. And yes, looking at the studies, they are all descended from wolves, and this probably happened over multiple times, okay, and in multiple places. So it wasn't just one friendly wolf that befriended humans, and then that's the great, 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 great grandma of all dogs. No, this happened throughout the world multiple times. And that's also where we get to see all these different breed differences, especially when you're looking at different continents and different countries. Okay, because we did create our animals, a lot of choice breeding. We'll talk about that in a minute. So it was the inbreeding of these animals. So we brought these animals came in to live with humans, and then are breeding amongst themselves because close proximity. And then, you know, they're kind of all starting to get related, and cousins and whatnot are getting with cousins and whatnot. So that's probably where a lot of those things we see in breeds today stemmed from. It's probably accidents that then humans are like, oh, I like this particular facial feature. Let's see if we can get again. I'm going to make sure that, you know, this dog and this dog get together. Okay. But it's a little bit more than just the looks on how dogs are different than wolves today. When you look at a wolf's face, you're going to notice that they have a much longer muzzle and that their teeth are much bigger. Remember the big bad wolf, okay? My grandma, what big teeth you have? They're hunters, right? Wolves are hunters. They need those teeth as weapons. Dogs, on the other hand, are now mostly foragers. There have been numerous studies to see what dogs do out in, quote, the wild without us. And hunting isn't really the main way they get food. It's more foraging, finding stuff. So because they're not equipped with these weapons anymore, they're not using them primarily. Instead, they're using their instincts and senses to find it. Another thing that dogs have that wolves do not, and very, very few animals have, is the ability to read human gestures. We take it for granted that when we point at something, our dogs look. That is amazing in the animal world. Even our closest relatives, the great apes, they don't do pointing. So if you go to a zoo and you point at something, the gorilla is not going to do anything because they don't understand what pointing is. Dogs have figured that out. And again, with that genetics, the ones that figured it out got the best response from the humans around them, were able to pass on their genes so that they're puppies. That's the current theory. It's just so amazing. If you have cats in the home or other animals in the home, I encourage you to test this out because it is very fascinating how you can train them to know what pointing is, but it's not an instinctual thing. And yes, our dogs are human-made creations. Internationally, there are 360 recognized breeds, and that doesn't even count like golden doodles or puggles, so ones that we're pretty common today, but those aren't even officially recognized as distinct breeds. So the list is almost endless. And we did selectively breed them for specific jobs and tasks. So when you look at these different breeds, the American Kennel Association will put them in different groups, including like the sporting group. So ones that were bred to hunt birds, for instance, like retrievers, setters, beagles, actually, sorry, beagles fall into the hound group along with Afghan hound, wolfhound, all these other. So there are sight hounds and then there are scent hounds as well. So beagles fall in the scent hound one. Terriers. Terriers were initially bred to be rodent control. They were pest control. So when you hear like Dorothy's dog in Wizard of Oz is a cairn terrier. A cairn is a stone structure. So these terriers were specifically bred with their little pointy faces to be able to get in between the stones to get any rats living in there, to get them away from the food stored within the cairns. So when you think about all of these different animals and what they were specifically bred for, there's a lot going on. We also would breed for the aesthetics and the size. So when you think back to our gray wolf and you realize that that animal led to the giant bull mastiffs and king corsos, and also to the tiny, tiny little teacup poodles, that's us. That's doing a lot of intervention there. Unfortunately, with that, there is a lot of misunderstanding of these breeds and how genetics plays a role in how these animals act. So some of our smaller dogs were specifically bred to be companion dogs, like some of our little French bulldogs, animals like that. But as I mentioned, like the Cairn Terrier, it had a job to do. So it's going to be a little bit higher energy than a companion animal. And it's going to need to release that energy in some way. So families who adopt a little terrier expecting it to be a couch potato all day will be disappointed most of the time because terriers tend to be a little bit more active than that. And unfortunately, over 3 million dogs enter our shelters in the US every single year. And some of that is strays. Some of that is we're just, not providing the safety that we need to keep our dogs indoors or within the yard. And, we got diggers, we got climbers, we got jumpers, we got escape artists. I have beagles. They're amazing escape artists. And unfortunately, I met a lot of my neighbors in my first house because my beagles got out a lot before I finally wised up and reinforced my fence. So we do get a lot of strays in, but I would say it's about 50-50. We get a lot of surrenders in as well. And that's where those expectations of what the dog is going to be in your home versus what its genetic background is telling it to do, there's that real disconnect. So if you are interested in adopting a German Shepherd, a Husky, one of those terrier things, absolutely do your research and try to figure out, is this going to be the right match for me? Now, of course, every individual dog is different. And of course, there are mutts out there that we can't even really tell what they are. So asking questions of the breeder, the shelter, the rescue that you're working with to understand what this dog is going to need so that you can provide it for them. Because pretty much there's a lot of miscommunication on what our dogs need and what we can, kind of slack off on. Behavior problems often come when a dog is missing a critical component in its care. So we're going to do a little bit of a dig, pun intended. Sorry, I'm feeling very punny today. We're going to look at what our dogs need. So that's shelter, healthcare, exercise, and diet. Let's do a brief overview of dogs. Lifespans typically 10 to 13 years. Now that's average for all dogs. Our larger breed dogs do tend to be on the shorter end of that lifespan, and our smaller breed dogs do tend to be on the longer end of that lifespan. So that's just a rough estimate that encompasses all of those. Care costs, I'm talking about like this is like care costs on a budget. Okay, you could easily spend way more than a couple $1,000s a year on your dog, depending on what you're going for. But this is like, basic budget food, basic toys, basic bedding, stuff like that. You're more than welcome to go crazy with that Martha Stewart name brand Gucci. I don't even know because I don't get that stuff because my dogs destroy everything I give them. So it's not really worth it. But bare minimum, you're going to be looking at $1,000 to $2,000 a year. The ASPCA has amazing resources for providing for dogs and what they need for their care. So I would highly recommend that you just browse through their articles. You can learn so much. And going back to what we were talking about with our energy when it comes to dogs, typically the very large dogs and some of the toy dogs are going to be on the lowest end of that energy. Those toy breeds like pugs, some of the terriers, they were bred for companion. And some of our working dogs are going to be on those higher ends. So if you look at the chart that I've provided, the dark blue line is the minimum amount of exercise, and then the light blue line is the maximum amount of exercise that you should expect for this particular type of dog. So Great Dane, you're looking at, 30 minutes, half an hour, for an hour, okay, a day of exercise. For our sporting dogs, our retriever dogs, like golden retrievers and huskies, you're looking at minimum of an hour and going up to 2 hours of exercise. And when I say that, I don't mean go for a 2-hour walk in the morning and then that's it, your hands are washed all day. This is throughout the day. Dogs like to take lots of naps in between times, but when they wake up, ooh, that high energy is back. So especially for some of these working dog breeds, our retrievers, our shepherds, our huskies, do not be surprised if you go for a really long walk and you get home and you're exhausted and they are still ready to go. There are lots of different ways that you can do exercise. It's not just walking, it's not just running. There's lots of different things that you can do to have them expend this energy, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Again, breed is a guide, and it can be a fabulous guide, but each animal's going to be unique based on their personality and also based on their medical needs. So in our home, what are we looking for that we need to provide for them in their home? We do want to give them a nice place to sleep. Here in Illinois, it's great to have an elevated platform, so a little raised veranda bed for them that allows airflow underneath. That's going to help keep them warmer during the winter and cooler during the summer. If you've ever slept in a sleeping bag on the cold, hard ground, That's kind of what it feels like when you put a dog bed just right on the floor there, when there's nothing no airflow in between to prevent that cold from the ground just seeping right up into your bones. Highly recommend crate training animals. This is a great way to help keep them safe and also secure. There's some misconceptions on crates, oh, I don't want to put my dog in a cage all day. That's mean. But you can make it so that it tones into their denning instinct. And for my dogs, I have one that suffers from pretty high anxiety, and he puts himself in his crate. So if there's something stressful going on, when I watch a scary movie and I'm reacting to the scary movie, he'll try to comfort me at first. And then he's like, you know what, to heck with you, human, you're still doing this to yourself. I'm out. And he'll just go and put himself in his crate because that's where he feels safe. That's his space. And I always make sure I never force him out of that space because I want him to associate it with positive, safe vibes. You can feed in the crate, you can provide treats in the crate to make them create those positive associations. And you can even crate while you're still there so that they don't associate being in the crate with being alone. There are lots of great resources available. And if you have more questions about that, I'm more than happy to go into a deeper dive on crate training later on. Weather gear can be very, very important depending on the type of dog you have and their needs. If you have a dog with a lighter coat, they may need some sunscreen protection when it's really, really hot out. When there's snow and ice on the ground and you got icy sidewalks with the rock salt, want to make sure that we're really paying attention to those paw pads, because the salts can cause cracks, bleeding, and then also they can ingest that salt, which can cause some stomach problems. So some people avoid that just by putting booties on. And it is very adorable and fun to watch a dog wear booties for the first time, but you can train them so that they are used to it and it's an okay thing. Or just making sure that we're cleaning up our dog's feet after they come in. And then of course we want toys and interactive stuff for them to do. Now, different breeds are going to have different needs, looking at those coat thicknesses, like I mentioned, the size, and any genetic conditions that they have. So, for example, some of our shorter leg dogs, like Dachshunds, they want to come and jump up on the couch with us. They want to be up with us, but that can put a lot of strain on their spine. So providing a ramp or providing stairs for them so they're not exerting that pressure on their spine their entire life is going to save them from back problems later on. So understanding and talking to your veterinarian about any special considerations you might want to put in place for your particular dog is always a great way to go. And speaking of that veterinarian, 100% we want to do that annual vet visit. Even if everything's going great, we want to get our yearly vaccinations and our yearly heartworm test and do that wellness exam. Animals are really good about hiding medical conditions from us. And so sometimes the only way you're going to find it early enough to do something really well about it is by finding it super early, like through a blood panel or through that vet exam. We also want to make sure that we're doing our parasite preventions. Some parasites can cause changes in behavior, so making sure that we're keeping up with those flea and tick preventatives and that heartworm preventative. Spay and neuter is great for population control in case your dog accidentally gets out and whoopsie, there is a litter there. But also some behaviors are linked to hormones. A female in heat is going to be a lot more antsy. She's going to be very, very agitated. And so the easiest way to get rid of some of those behaviors is simply by taking out the hormones that cause them. We also want to make sure that we're paying attention to some of the more maintenance-y areas through grooming. So looking at their nails, their ears, their teeth, and their anal glands. When you see that butt scoot happening, a lot of times the culprit is anal glands. Those are normally expressed when a dog defecates, but sometimes they can get impacted or swollen and even get an infection, and that's no fun for everybody. So groomers will often check those for you, or the vet will if you're not comfortable doing it yourself. Again, I'm going to go back to sometimes there are breed-specific things to be on the look for, especially chronic conditions. Some animals are more prone to allergies or joint problems, and it's good to know to be on the lookout for those things. Again, talk to your vet, see if they're aware of anything to be looking for. Sometimes these medical treatments do hide in behavior problems. So, and I'll talk about this later, one of the first things we recommend is if this is a new behavior, go to the vet, see if there's a medical condition underlying it. I can and do have an entire presentation on canine exercise because it is such an important thing. Exercise can also be known as enrichment. And it's going to, the needs will vary based on their breed, their age, their health, you know, what's going on with them personally. And as I mentioned before, exercise is not just walking and running, because that's great, that's physical, but we also want to engage their brains. So mental engagement can be just as exhausting as physical engagement. Think about back in school, how tired you would be after a really big test. You know, your booty was in a seat all day, right? Weren't running marathons or anything, but your brain was in overdrive. So super, super tired at the end of the day. Same thing for our animals. And this is not just for dogs, this is across the board, all animals. Finding those natural instincts and figuring out ways to engage them in a fun and safe manner. For example, I mentioned that dogs in the wild tend to be foragers. So having them work to find their food is a great way to engage that behavior. Training, teaching them things, that's a great way to engage them. And you can even just put apart, you know, portions of their kibble and dole them out as you're doing training sessions. And don't try to do training all at once. I fell into this trap. I would try to do training like, okay, every day when I get home, we're going to do training for an hour. Whew, that's a lot. That's a lot of mental engagement all at once. So spreading it out over the day, like 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, 5 minutes before bed, something like that, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck there because they're fresher. And if you do those longer periods of time, I know I saw it, the dogs just get kind of frustrated and they don't really know what's going on anymore. And it's just, you want training to end on a happy note every time so that it's exciting and fun for both of you, okay? So I do have some examples of those foraging enrichment items that you can use. So anytime you're in a pet store and you see a toy and you don't know what it's for, it's probably an enrichment toy. So there's something as simple as a puzzle bowl, which we have here. So has to use its tongue to get to all the things. Okay. There's some that are even more complicated than that. And it's, you know, there's like things to push and levels to unlock, and it can get very, very complicated. Start simple with your dog. You don't want to over frustrate them. Okay. Just like when we were learning how to write and speak, we started with the ABCs, right? We didn't start with Shakespeare. So we want to start small and simple and work our way up to it. Now, yes, you can go and spend an entire paycheck on enrichment items in the store, but please don't. You don't have to do that. There's a lot of stuff that you can do just at home with your recyclables. So here we have this adorable Roddy who had to figure out how to get his kibble out of an egg carton. So it's a great repurpose use for that egg carton. And you can see that that Roddy is super engaged. He's like, how do I get the food? Oh my gosh. So yes, you can go super complicated, super expensive, or you can go the DIY route. And there are so many websites. Oh, we have some handouts as well. I'm more than happy to share that with stuff that you can make from stuff that you have around the house. Okay. All right. So moving on to diet. There are so many options for the dieting, for the diet options, and there's huge price differences. You go into any pet store and it's just overwhelming. This is something really talk to your vet about this. They're going to have the latest information on what the studies are showing. They're going to know if those trendy diets are actually helpful or if they're more harmful. And they're going to be able to tell you, you know, is what you're feeding appropriate for their age, giving them the right amount of protein. Is it good for the weight goals that you have for your dog? One of the biggest problems that veterinarians are seeing right now is obesity in dogs. Some of that comes just from giving treats all the time because we love to love our pets. I completely understand that. So when you're doing some of these training sessions, if you have a kibble that your dog really loves, use that in place of the treats. You know, save a portion of their dinner and use that for training or for engagement, you know. And again, making them work for it is going to help with those obesity problems too, because they're not just slurping it all up in 5 seconds from a bowl, but they're moving around, they're engaging, and they're spending time with something. And just like with people, it's always a good idea to slow down how fast we eat. So some of those puzzle bowls can be really great for that as well. We definitely want to limit or erase the processed people food that we are giving to our pets. There's just a lot of stuff going on in those, and it's delicious and our dogs want it and we want to give it to them, but we have to be understanding that a tiny piece of food to a tiny dog, that's still too much for them. Okay, like it's, the calories are way out of proportion with what their kibble is going to be and what their nutritional needs are. So, you know, really talking to your vet about appropriate treats that you can give. My vet in particular turned me on to carrots and green beans. My dogs love them. And it's really fun for me to, you know, chop up a carrot into little pieces. Or sometimes when I'm feeling really fun, I give them a whole carrot and I watch them chew it like a corn on the cob. And that's super fun. And I have way too many videos of them doing that. So definitely talk to your vet about what is appropriate for your dog, for their age, for their size range, and for their nutritional needs. Okay, so some of those behavior issues hopefully have been addressed by understanding like, oh, this is a part that my dog is missing. My dog is bored. My dog is eating too much and is becoming a lazy couch potato. And I need to provide a variety of enrichment activities. You know, what is going on there? Oh, my dog jumps up on the bed and doesn't like his bed because it's really cold. You know, hopefully we've addressed some of those, but we're going to look into some common ones that we hear about at the shelter. Again, if you have a new behavior, you got to rule out stuff first. Medical concerns is going to be a big one. Another thing is looking at environmental changes. Have you moved recently? Has something changed in the household? One example I love to give is a couple, they brought in a behaviorist because they could not figure out, all of a sudden their dog was super fearful inside the home. Once they took the dog out of the home, it was fine, happy, its normal self, but it was acting very anxious all the time inside the home. They couldn't understand why. The behaviorist asked, have you purchased anything for your home in this time frame? And the husband realized that he had installed one of those subsonic pest control devices that sends vibrations through the ground to prevent moles and voles from creating burrows. He went, he turned it off, and the dog immediately relaxed. So the dog had been sensing that device and it had been stressing it out
the entire time, to the point where it could not settle and get comfortable in its own home. Once that environmental change was addressed, the dog went back to its normal self. Social changes. Have you introduced new people or pets to the environment? I thought my senior dog had a bladder infection because she was just having accidents all over the house, and I couldn't understand why. Well, it turns out she was responding to the brand new kitten we had brought home. So that she was showing us her displeasure there. And she used to be a single pet, and all of a sudden she had some contenders, and it turned out that the new kitten was stealing her food. So once we addressed that issue, the peeing stopped, because the dog was trying to communicate with us that something was wrong and something was making it not happy, and we just hadn't realized what it was. Now, when you get a new pet in your home, you want to give it time to adjust, because even though this is going to be their forever home and it's a happy occasion, the dog doesn't necessarily know that. Every change is a trauma for them, okay? Being brought into a new environment, it's just like your first day at school, right? You don't know where the bathrooms are, you don't know what the schedule is, you don't know who's nice and who's a bully. It's just, everything is so confusing. They're going to need time to decompress. There's the rule of 3. So 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. In 3 days, kind of figuring out where everything is. We might be super clingy or super aloof while we try to figure things out. Within 3 weeks, you might start seeing some of their personality and some of those behaviors that might be a little concerning. As they feel more comfortable, you know, like doing what they want to do. Maybe that's barking at the mailman every single day. Maybe that's waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so some of that stuff might be part of the transition, but it might be just who the dog is. By 3 months, as long as we've had nice, consistent routines every day so that the dog can feel secure and understand its environment, by 3 months, those behaviors, they haven't worked themselves out yet, might need to be addressed further in depth. I always like to talk about dominance before we talk about how to modify behavior, because there is a lot of history with this theory and it's very prevalent, mostly with dogs. Some people apply it with other animals, but it's dominance theory, and you may be familiar with it. You may just know about the thing of you're supposed to be the alpha in your house. Unfortunately, this theory is based on bad science, and then it was taken and warped from the bad science to apply to a situation that it doesn't belong in. The original study was refuted, and it was done on wolves. Captive wolves who didn't know each other in a zoo in 1947. And zoos in 1947, we're basically talking a concrete block. Okay, they were shoved into a concrete room and then they were studied. That would be like if we based all of our ideas on human behavior by watching reality shows. Okay, so a bunch of strangers thrown in together in a room and cameras on them. I don't know about you, but that's not really what my life looks like. And I wouldn't want anyone to determine how things happen with me based on Big Brother. Okay, so with dogs, their hierarchy is very, very fluid. The control of resources is fluid. And studies show that the relationships between dogs are determined by experience. So there's no, ooh, alpha in control, I must be in control at all times. That's not a thing. It's not even really a thing with wolves either, but it's especially not a thing with dogs. So this idea of I need to assert dominance over my dog so he knows who the boss is, your dog is going to be afraid of you because you are doing things that make it uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean the dog respects you as an alpha, because that's not a concept that they understand at all. Okay, so when you are looking at training, what you really want to look at, not dominance training, you want to look at positive reinforcement training. You want to do the least intrusive, minimally aversive, or the LEMA training. And this idea is that you use the least offensive, for lack of a better word, way to get the dog to do something else. Okay, so we don't start with those domineering use of pain and fear and control. Okay, instead, we look at managing the animal's environments. We look at the animal's physical well-being. We're redirecting away from the behavior, and we are counter conditioning and desensitizing them so that they do not react in that undesirable way to something. Okay, so there's a little bit of confusion about what positive reinforcement training is. Basically, you're going to be looking to say yes, opportunities to say yes and reward. So treats are going to be your new best friend. And finding those high value treats, doing a treat preference test is going to be great. You don't just need to use food though. There are lots of ways to reward an animal. So if they are seeking attention, if they love being pet on the belly, for instance, you can use that as a reward for a good behavior. If they have a particular toy or activity that they love, you can use that as a good behavior. So, oh, they want to throw the ball. We only throw the ball when they are sitting calmly, not barking, right in front of us. That's when the ball gets thrown. That's their reward for doing what we wanted them to do. Okay. We are avoiding anything that causes pain or fear. And we use items that provide guidance and limit the behavior, but in a humane way. So no choke collars, no prong collars. There are tools that you can use, and I'll show you some examples of those later on, that will get you the same effect, but it's not causing that pain or fear response in your dogs. Now, one caveat of positive reinforcement training is called the art of ignoring. Reward what you want, ignore what you don't. Okay, that's great, but sometimes you need to understand that dogs are doing something because it's fun, and the behavior itself is rewarding. It's self-fulfilling. So us ignoring it isn't really going to do anything. So for example, this woman in the picture, if the dog wants her attention, then her ignoring it is perfect. She's denying the dog the attention until the dog is doing what she wants it to do. However, if the dog is jumping up because it likes to jump up and it has nothing to do with her, then her ignoring it isn't going to change that behavior because the dog is already being rewarded, having the ability to jump up. So the main thing we want to look at is, how is this behavior rewarding? How can we prevent the behavior from starting in the first place? Teaching them what to do and rewarding them when they do it correctly. So saying no to a dog is useless unless you have something for them to do instead. So showing them what we want instead and then rewarding to reinforce that is going to be great. Okay. So when I talk about managing the environment, that's different from dog training because the dog isn't learning anything. We're just preventing situations from happening. You're controlling the environment. Does your dog like to beg at the table? Okay, you don't want the dog begging at the table. The dog isn't allowed in the room while people are eating. Now, the second you allow the dog in the room while people are eating, they're going to go right back to begging, right? But you're not allowing them to practice bad behaviors. Practice makes perfect, right? So practicing bad behaviors, they're just going to get better at those bad behaviors. So let's cut them off, okay? We want to set our pets up for success and give them more opportunities to show correct, desirable behaviors that we can reward. So some behaviors that we get calls about at DuPage County Animal Services are aggressive behaviors. So snarling, snapping, lunging, all these things that are perceived as a threat to us, to our safety, to other animals' safety, can be very, very concerning. Sometimes that can play out in a couple different ways. So it might be a territorial thing. They are protecting a resource. Maybe it's a space, maybe it's an object, maybe it's you. Sometimes it's redirected aggression, which is very confusing for us because you may not see the original target. For example, your dog is looking out the window, sees a cat. Your dog hates cats. Then the other dog comes up and your dog is like, ah, onto the other dog, okay? All you're seeing is the tension and the aggression between your two dogs. You had no idea there was a cat outside. So if you're noticing that these behaviors are happening after a particular event, after a trip to the dog park, after they've been outside, you know, something like that, play around with it. See what happens when you switch up the routine. Does this still happen? If possible, it might have been a redirected behavior of something that you're not seeing. Also, play can sometimes be misconstrued as aggression. They can sound very, very intense while they are playing. The important thing there to look for is it reciprocated? Okay, is one animal going after the other and then the other one goes back and forth and, oh, I fall over and now you fall over, and that's play. That is perfectly fine. Sometimes it sounds really, really scary. You know, sometimes teeth are showing and it can be a little tense, especially if you're at a dog park and you don't know the other dog, you don't know that other person. Look for reciprocity, okay? So if it's one-sided, if one dog is continually going and going and going and the other dog's just trying to get away, that's no longer play. That's when we need an intervention. Also, fear is often mistaken for aggression. So that whole thought process of, you know, the best defense is a good offense. So I'm going to scare away the thing that scares me so it doesn't get too close. This can happen with people, with animals. It can happen at different locations. It can even be noises. There are many different reasons why we might be seeing those fear stances. So when you look here in this picture, the animal is hunkered backwards, the ears are back, the body is low, and the tail is tucked. Those are classic fear body signals, okay? Even though the teeth are visible, maybe they're growling, the hackles are raised, everything else about this animal tells us that it is afraid of what's going on. It's leaning back, it's trying to get away from it. A lot of times this will manifest in what's called reactivity. So the most common ones are leash reactive and barrier reactive. Let's say your dog is at the dog park having a great time, fabulous. We leash up, we leave the dog park, they see another dog on a leash and they go nuts. And they are growling, snapping, you know, going super crazy. They were just fine, right? It may even be the same dog. Why does the leash make such a difference? Why does a fence barrier make something different? And part of that, there's two modes there. It can be a defensive, okay? I'm going to scare away the thing that's scaring me, and I don't feel like I can get away from it because I'm on a leash. Or it's a frustration thing. I really want to get to that animal and I don't know how to show it, so I'm just going to go to my craziness, okay? So that's where you're going to have to be observing what's happening before, what's happening afterwards. If we get closer, if we get farther apart, if we turn around, what are some things we can do? So we want to look at that body language to see what is causing it. Are they leaning forward at first, or are they leaning back at first before that reaction starts? Leaning forward might be an indicator of that frustration. They want to get to the thing. Leaning backwards might be an indicator that they're afraid of the thing. So what are some things we can do? The look at that game is fabulous. I'll show you a video on that. And then also training for an emergency U-turn. We do retreat. So my dog is very leash reactive, is very afraid of other dogs, especially dogs bigger than him. When we're on the sidewalk and we're coming down and I see another dog coming, I call retreat and we turn around and we go away. And when we talk about loose leash walking, That's a great way. How he does his loose leash walking shows a great way to teach the emergency U-turn. So we'll talk about that later on. But let's look at that game. In this video, we're going to see a dog and the trainer looking at dogs on the other side of the fence and getting treated before there's a reaction. So you're rewarding the non-reactions. Let's take a look. And the key here is to help keep the focus on you. So you don't want to start out too close where they can't focus on you at all. You want to start out at quite a bit of difference, and you're going to be watching. So when your dog looks, she makes the click, she does a marker, and then she rewards, but she has the dog turn away and turn the focus back on her. So anytime, now there she clicked to tell him that he did it right, but he didn't look. So she actually brought the treat in front of his face to lure his attention back to her. Now, if this goes well, he can get a little bit closer and then a little bit closer. But this is going to take many, many sessions, okay? So if you have dogs that are, you know, ignoring, that might be a little easier for your dog to handle. However, if their dog is focused on your dog, that might be a little bit harder to handle. So pay attention to what's going on in the situation as well, so that you can have the appropriate distance where your dog is in a good learning mindset. Okay. Humping and jumping. These are one of those things that it's really embarrassing for us when our dogs are humping each other at the dog park. And, you know, we think, oh my God, my dog is fixed. Why is it doing this? Well, humping is not what we think it is. It doesn't have anything to do with sex, doesn't have anything to do with dominance or that social hierarchy. Why do they do it? A lot of times it's to get out extra energy, okay? Now, humping does feel good. It's an enjoyable activity. And sometimes they will use it to help release anxiety. It's also a play behavior. It might be one of those socially awkward play behaviors, but the thing to keep in mind is if the humpy is doing okay, then we can leave it be. It's when the humpy starts getting uncomfortable and starts reacting and trying to correct, that's when we need to intervene. It's embarrassing for us, but as long as everybody's getting along, it's okay. All right. The best way to get the dog to stop humping is to give them another outlet for that energy. Something appropriate, okay? Have their favorite toys. If your dog is a habitual humper, make sure that you reserve that favorite toy for when you need to redirect their attention, or their favorite treat, redirect their attention, okay? Jumping, same thing, not about social hierarchy, not about dominance, and not even necessarily about aggression. Again, it's a way to release extra energy. They could be super excited. It might be a greeting. It might be a play behavior. It can also be an anxious behavior. My dogs will sometimes jump up on me when there's loud noises going on and they're looking for comfort. They're looking to me to see what I'm going to do. So that's where we get into that. What are they looking for with that behavior? What is the pattern? If it's a greeting behavior and they want your attention, then the easiest way is to deny them that attention until they're giving you a desired behavior, or on the floor, sitting, whatever it is you're looking for. Ask them for that behavior, and as soon as they give it, then give them the attention. And remember, pushing or saying no, that's negative attention, but it's still attention. So that's where the art of ignoring comes in. I mean, absolutely ignoring, no talking, no touching until they're giving that desired behavior. This is really great when you're using hand signals to ask for behaviors, because then you can really make sure that you're not tempted to say something to the dog. But asking for a behavior is different than saying, no, don't, Fido, bah. And providing them that outlet, because you're giving a short, sweet command: sit, down, whatever it is that you've trained them to do in that instance, that's what you're going to ask for. As soon as they give it, oh, thank you, oh, good dog, you know, and give them all the loves and kisses and attention that they want. Leash manners. So this is not an instinctual thing for dogs. This is something that they are going to need to be trained to do. And you want them to check in with you constantly throughout the walk. That's how you're going to get them to stay closer to your side, not to rip your arm off. And we want to reward them for being next to you and giving eye contact. So in this instance, when we're giving our treats, we're doing it right at our side. We're not reaching for them. We're not throwing the treat to them. Nope, treats come when you're right by my side. That's the only place we get treats. All right. Changing directions frequently so that they have to pay attention to you is going to help with that as well. And also using appropriate tools to help guide them. So I talked about the prong collars and the choke collars. Yes, they will mitigate some of those behaviors, but it is not changing how the dog processes what's going on. Okay, it's not changing the emotional response to if they see another dog and they want to pull really hard. As soon as you're not using those tools, they're going to want to do it. And in this instance, it's going to associate you with pain and fear. And that's never something we want. We want them to associate us with good things. We also need to understand the purpose of a walk. So for us, it's physical. Right? It's moving, it's seeing the sights, it's getting out there. For the dogs, the purpose of the walk is to encounter their environment, mostly through their nose. So when they're taking sniff breaks, that's the whole point of the walk for them. Oh, Susie down the street came by here, woohoo! You know, that's what they're there for. So allowing them those moments is going to lead for a much happier walk. When our dogs were very, very young, my husband would take them on a mile-long walk, but he never stopped. It was constant movement, constant movement. And he would get back and the puppies would go crazy and run all over the house. When I would walk them, I'm a little bit lazier than my husband, so I made sure that anytime they were interested in sniffing, we just hung out. Let them sniff away, absolutely. Because I wasn't walking for me, I was walking for my dogs. So I wanted to make sure that they were doing that. My husband was walking the dogs, but he was also interested in physical activity for himself. And on my walks, the dogs would come home and they would be a lot more tired because they had been using their brains and processing all of those smells throughout the walk. So making sure you have a good balance there is going to be key. So let's look at a video of loose leash walking. So this trainer is using a slip lead. It puts a little bit of pressure on the neck to indicate, oh, we're changing directions. Now, the only thing I would say is he is not using treat rewards. I would definitely say pay your dog for when they're doing something you want. You know, we like paychecks at the end of a work week, pay your dog. And back and forth, praising, rewarding every time they change direction, getting very, very excited. And then towards the end, the dog is no longer pulling because it's staying close. It wants to be near the person. It wants to know what's going on next. But lots of reasons that dogs bark. I'm going to have to breeze through this real quickly. Sorry about that. Trying to mitigate why they're barking. So is it a stimuli that they're barking at? Okay, let's use window films. Let's use blinds. Let's use gates. Let's try to prevent them from seeing what they're barking at. We want to investigate what those triggers and motivations are. We also want to ask for incompatible behaviors. So dogs physically can't bark if they're smelling something. Not something they can do. So you put a treat in your hand and you put it right in front of their face. They're sniffing the treats. They're being quiet. And you can give them the treat because they are doing what you wanted. They are being quiet. Okay. And that's what you're doing. You're looking for reasons to say yes. So those quiet times, yes. If you know what their trigger is, get to them before they react. So if you know that they bark at the mailman, as soon as they see the mailman, but before they start barking, yes, and give a treat. Yes, and give a treat. Okay. So then their focus is on you and not on the mailman. For resource guarding, this can happen for many different things. We as humans have ownership feelings for our stuff. We don't like it when people mess with our food, with our, environment, with our things. And dogs also feel that too. So teaching them to drop it and leave it, offering traits. So for example, this morning my dog found a dead mouse and I offered an entire handful of treats so that my dog would drop it and I could then dispose of the dead mouse. And he thought it was totally worth it. A couple weeks ago when this happened, I only offered one treat and he just looked at me like, are you kidding me? This dead mouse is way better than one treat. So you definitely need to know, like, okay, what's going to be worth it to your dog to do this? Also, we can just leave them and their stuff alone. We can teach our kids to leave them alone. There is no reason for you to be reaching for their dog's food while they're eating. There are ways that you can mitigate that. Feed them in a crate so that they're completely separate and just let them have that sense of ownership for their stuff. We have it for our stuff. It's understandable that they have it for theirs. Now, sometimes these behaviors are just a bit too much for us to handle. So we can go on to professionals that will help. So certified trainers can help with some basic behaviors, but typically they're more for like the obedience stuff. Behavior consultants are that step above, and they're going to be very helpful with complex behavior problems, especially like fear and frustration based behaviors. A step above that is veterinarian behaviorists. And with all of these, we definitely want to understand what methods these professionals are using. We don't want them to use that dominance or that pain or fear-based training. We want that LIMA, the least intrusive, minimally aversive, because studies show that that training has the longest lasting effects. You put a little bit more effort in, but the effects are longer lasting. And most importantly, you maintain that positive bond with your dog. We do have a list available on our website. And if you would like, I can absolutely forward it to you for any LIMA trainers and consultants and behaviorists in our area. All right, folks, thank you so much for sticking with me. I'm sorry I went a little over time. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat box now. I will stick around for questions. Also coming up, we do have a couple more webinars. We have one more in September, which is next Thursday, choosing a pet professional. So if you have more questions about those certified behaviorists, those trainers, those veterinarian behaviorists, this is going to be the one for you. So join us then. And then also we have DIY enrichment. I mentioned that there are ways that you can make this stuff on your own with stuff around the house. So you can join us and see some options there. Then we're going to skip a week. So towards the end of October, we'll have shed for small animals. So the needs for our smaller animals and what we can provide for them. Thank you again for joining me, folks. Now, if at any point you have questions, I am always happy to answer by email. So please feel free to email me at humane.education@dupageco.org. You can also reach out to us by phone during business hours. We are always happy to help and answer questions for anybody that has them.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I missed the bird webinar last week or the week before, and I was wondering if that's available online.
It will be. I need to finish editing it and then post it online. So hopefully by the beginning of next week, it will be available online and it'll be posted to our website as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we have some great questions here. Yes, I will go ahead and email out our enrichment items document that I have. I would also encourage you to join me because I go a little bit further in depth in that webinar happening in October, but I will share that DIY enrichment item document for everybody. And do I have a suggestion for treats that you can offer your pets in high volume, like repeatedly rewarding? Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is to find a dog food that they absolutely love. Talk to your vet about this, something that maybe it's just different type of dog food, okay? And the little kibbles, just individual ones of those are going to be perfect. I like to just have a bunch in my pocket so that anytime my dogs are giving me behaviors I like, I can toss them some, okay? Beyond that, making sure whatever treats you're using, break them into tiny, tiny little pieces, all right? And it does not have to be a huge portion for them to see it as a reward. It can be on the small side. So another option is I do like jerky. I do duck jerky and I break it into like pea-sized pieces. And even some of the crumbs, sometimes I'll have some on my fingers and my dogs still are like, ooh, 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 there's still some left. So don't be afraid of having too small a piece because it's still going to be rewarding for them. Do we have suggestions on stopping a dog from killing chipmunks, butterflies, squirrels, and moles? So in that regard, I would say that they are acting out the most basic natural behavior that they have, that hunting, that foraging behavior. So trying to find ways you can do that safely somewhere else is going to help them. So there are many different types of activities where it's hones in on that hunting instinct. And some of it is as simple as tiring them out, trying them to get their food. Okay. Tired dogs are happy dogs. So one great example is instead of feeding my dogs in a bowl, I like to scatter feed. And that's just what it sounds like. I take their kibble and I throw it on the ground. Sometimes it's on my patio, on my concrete patio. Sometimes it's in the grass. Sometimes it's everywhere. And then they have to hunt and find it. They have to search for it. And that takes up a lot of time. It keeps their focus because it's their food. They really want it. Now, as far as specifically going after animals, I'm going to have to do a little bit more research into that because it's one of those self-rewarding behaviors, right? It's fun to do, so they're going to keep doing it as long as they have access to it. So trying to prevent their access from areas where these animals are more often is going to be one method of management. I will check with my coworkers to see if they have any other suggestions, because unfortunately, that might be an instance where instead of just letting them out loose in the yard, we restrict their movements using a tie out or a lead, or we stay with them 100% of the time to make sure that they're not going into those areas. One of the recommendations in the chat is to use cut up hot dogs. That is great, and it is definitely a high value food item, but I would warn you that those are very, very fatty and can lead to some nutritional issues when you're trying to do it all the time, okay? So definitely talk to your vet about what you can do. I go back to the Sesame Street of cookies are a sometimes snack to hot dogs are a sometimes snack. That's not something that we want to be consistently rewarding with, simply because of the high fat content. And I mean, we're much bigger than our dogs, so like we can handle one hot dog and we're fine, but one hot dog for them is like 4 or 5 hot dogs for us, for the average size dog and the average size human. So that's a lot of hot dog for one animal. All right, wonderful, folks. I don't see any other questions, but feel free to throw them in there. I am going to put my link to the program survey back in the chat to everybody. So please, please fill that out. Give me your feedback. let me know some suggestions for future programs. I always want to know what people are interested in. Again, you can always reach out to me via email or reach out to us at the shelter via the phone number 630-407-2800. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I hope you had a great time. This is one of my favorite programs. So I had a lot of fun tonight, and I hope you learned something. Thanks for joining me. Have a great rest of your night. Thanks.